identified a substantial buildup of hostile forces right here in our own backyard. I'm giving you the green light to clean them out. Gentlemen, you're the best. Get up there and prove it.
Okay, boys, let's kick some.
I've got him. Watch your back. Moving down the right side. He's on me. Pull out. On your way. Keep on him.
ActionMax for your VCR.
Yeah.
If it were any more real, it wouldn't be a game.
Hello and welcome to another rental from the retro gaming blockbuster with ReplayRetro. I'm Matt, and on today's show we're taking a look at something a little different. Over the years, we've seen games stored on a variety of formats, from floppy disks to audio cassette tapes, flashcards to cartridges, and of course a vast array of optical media. But what some of you might not know is that VHS cassette tapes, the successful home video format of the 70s, 80s and 90s, which was dethroned only by DVD at the turn of the millennium, were also used for video games. I'm not talking about using VHS tapes to store purely game data, which I'm sure could be done just like most 8-bit computers did with audio cassettes, nor am I talking about the plethora of VHS board games such as the legendary Atmosphere series. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Each of you will now take a turn to roll the dice. Hurry!
Instead, I'm talking about home consoles which interacted with video footage stored on VHS tapes to create a photorealistic gaming experience which standard video games simply couldn't compete with. Well, at least that was the theory. If you've not heard of any such systems, then you'll probably be surprised to learn that there's actually quite a few of them out there, like Sega and Taiko's Video Driver, the Tiger Electronics Battle Vision, Viewmaster's Interactive Vision, Takara's Video Challenger, and of course, the subject of this particular episode. Produced by Worlds of Wonder, the ActionMax is probably the most well-known of the VHS consoles, and its parent company were no newcomers to the toy or indeed video game industries. Founded in 1980 by a group of former Atari employees, they'd already found huge success with Teddy Ruxpin and a host of other animated interactive dolls, including licensed examples like their talking Mickey Mouse. They also stole the Christmas #1 spot with their LazerTag toys, spawning a huge range of spin-off merchandise and proving that the company knew its stuff when it came to marketing. So true was this that when Nintendo wanted to bring their Famicom to the US, they turned to Worlds of Wonder for help, striking up a deal which would see the rapidly growing company act as distributor for the future video game giant. For Christmas 1985, Worlds of Wonder products were so in demand that the company was able to force retailers to take Nintendo Entertainment System consoles despite their lack of interest in the product following the video game crash, as the retailers simply couldn't risk being denied stock of the toys they actually wanted. This undoubtedly played a huge role in the successful US launch of Nintendo's console, and helped give the Japanese giant their place in the market today. However, Worlds of Wonder weren't happy to simply sit back and leave the video game market to their foreign ally. Around the same time, Hasbro were working on a project with Nolan Bushnell. Yep, that Nolan Bushnell. Codenamed Nemo. A game system using VHS tapes to bring full motion video to gaming, using a special kind of tape with multiple video sequences buffered by a console, so the player would only show one sequence at a time, depending on the player's choices in the game. This complicated system would eventually lead to games like Night Trap on the Sega Mega CD, but never got beyond a prototype for a VHS version. Worlds of Wonder knew things needed to be kept simple, choosing instead to use a single piece of video with no fancy and expensive extra technology. This would keep costs down while still providing live-action graphics seemingly decades ahead of the 8-bit competition. Again, in theory. The console itself was pretty simple, featuring a relatively low-spec Hitachi HD 401010 processor, a built-in mono speaker, 2-character LED display, and of course no cartridge or media slot of any kind. In fact, the system doesn't actually connect to the tapes or player in any way whatsoever. Instead, it uses 2 light sensors to track what's going on the screen and score the player accordingly. One sensor in the light gun tells the console what the player is aiming at, while the other sticks to the corner of the screen and is attached to the system by a wire. During gameplay, these 2 sensors compare the frequency of light pulses to determine what's happening. When there's nothing to shoot at, the screen sensor reads a dark circle. When there are targets, it will instead see a white circle flashing at a set frequency. Targets each have their own white circle, which is detected by the sensor in the controller. If the player shoots at an enemy target, the frequency will match that of the screen sensor, and the system knows to award the player a point. Hits on friendly targets, however, won't match frequency, and so the system knows to deduct points instead. If the gun sensor doesn't detect any white circle, then that shot is of course a miss. Switches on the system allow for 3 game modes, including the self-explanatory limited ammo mode and reflex mode, in which the player must score points quickly. A volume control dial controls simple generic sounds from the console, such as the gunshot noise, while a second dial adjusts the light gun sensor based on the player's distance from the screen. All game cassettes start with a few minutes of calibration screen, giving the player time to make these adjustments as required. In 1987, the ActionMax launched in the US for just under $100, a price point which certainly made it attractive to parents. The gameplay shown in adverts was undoubtedly very impressive at first glance, and would surely have caught the attention of children. The sleek machine came boxed with a pair of stereo headphones and a copy of Sonic Fury, a jet-fighting dogfighter game filmed over real terrain using model aircraft. At launch, 3 other games were available, with more advertised to follow. Each game cassette also came with previews of other games at the end, and as a cool bonus, these previews were actually playable, and so could be considered to be early use of free demos. So, would lightning strike again? Could Worlds of Wonder be as successful in the video game industry as they had been with toys? We'll see what happened next, after we take a look at the hardware itself and a few of the games. The ActionMax itself is quite a nice looking console in these 2 shades of grey with this nice raised ActionMax logo on it there. The case itself is also textured and it is quite a nice feeling case, although I'm not sure how well the camera will pick that up. On the front here you have, well, on the top I suppose, you have the score display, which is just a 2-position LED display, which lights up the old school system of little hex position numbers. You also have 2 dials, one for controlling the volume of the console's speaker and one for controlling your distance from the screen, though that one doesn't seem to make any real discernible distance that I can pick up on. I'm assuming it relates to sensitivity, but this thing is about as sensitive as a sponge. As a sponge. It's got no sensitivity at all. As sensitive as a sponge. This thing is going to make me out to be. Oh, great thinking on your feet there, Sherlock. Flipping heck. A sponge isn't even like a non. You could have said a rock, or a brick, or the floor. Anything that isn't sensitive. It's got no sensitivity at all. I am not half as bad a shot as this thing is going to make me out to be. So yeah, I can't get that to make any difference, and at the minute it's turned up way off the scale, which is probably indicative of the machine's build quality. You also have this bank of switches for selecting the different game modes, the last one of course simply being power. On the front you have a headphone socket for those fancy stereo headphones that came with the console. You also have the ability to turn off the internal speaker, or turn it on, as you wish. Another socket here for the gun controller to be connected to the console. Again, these are all just standard 3.5mm jacks, which is quite odd for a console. On the underneath, you can see the usual model numbers and bits of information, as well as a battery bay here. And you'll see that the system requires 4 C-cell batteries. C-cells were fairly common in the 80s. A lot of stuff used them, C's and D's. So yeah, these days, you know, you wouldn't use batteries at all. If you did, it would probably be a rechargeable pack, or it'd be double A's or something like that. But no, C-cells perfectly acceptable for that time period. Now you may be wondering, well, why does it take batteries? Well, don't forget, this was the 80s, and you didn't have an enormous number of plug sockets in the 80s because we didn't have a huge number of electrical appliances, really. You just didn't need it. So if your TV was already taking up a socket, and the socket next to that surely is going to have your VCR in it if you're planning on using the ActionMax, then you're going to need another socket to power this thing. So actually giving it batteries was a good idea from Worlds of Wonder there. You can't knock that. And when we move round to the back, you can see they did also give it the ability to use a power adapter if you had one. I believe it was sold separately. And you'll spot though on this model that the power socket has actually been filled with glue or epoxy of some description to stop you using it. I'm assuming that perhaps this is because this is one of the new old stock import consoles and it's maybe to protect it from being blown up. I don't know, maybe, maybe not. But either way, that's been glued shut, and I'm having to use the batteries. You'll see there's a couple more sockets and switches here. So this first socket is basically, it allows you to steal the audio from the VCR and run it through the console. So instead of running the game sounds through your TV's high quality speakers, you can instead run them through the small enclosed tinny speaker of the console. Now, again, that sounds a bit stupid, but if you were going to use the headphones, then it makes perfect sense, because there's no point just using the headphones and hearing the internal sounds. That's just the gunshots and the hit and miss signals. You also want to hear the audio from the cassette itself. And by stealing the audio from the VCR and running it through this socket, you'd be able to do that. So, as much as we're not going to use this right now, it is kind of a good feature if you did want to use headphones. You also have to select whether your VCR is stereo or mono so that you get the best quality sound put through the system. And then this last socket here is where the TV light sensor goes. So we'll take a look at the light sensor itself next. Essentially, it is a big red light with a sucker cup on the back of it. And if you look closely at the sucker cup, you can see that in the middle there is a light sensor. That'll allow it to read the signal from the screen when we attach it in just a moment's time. So we'll plug this into the back of the console so that that's all set up and ready. Next up we have the gun controller itself. It's fairly solid, though does seem quite cheap in just a flat grey. Nothing really special about it. It doesn't even say ActionMax anywhere, it only says made in China. Quite a nice trigger motion, though it does feel like it should go further back. And a fairly decent length of cord. And again, a 3.5mm jack on the end, which we plug into the system like so. The games, as you already know, do come on VHS cassettes, and they come in these nice cardboard cases, showing you what the game is about and giving you a few stills. You'll note that the stills do not have the targets on them, so it does make them look a little bit better. And then, of course, the game is just a standard VHS cassette with the usual warnings about not uploading footage to the internet, which wasn't a thing, because the FBI will come after you and you will spend 5 years in prison and possibly a $250,000 fine. So let's hope those things don't happen. Of course, when you want to play the game, you simply pop it into the VCR, except we're not going to do that. Because the truth of the matter is, these cassettes, they're really old. They're 30 years old. And it's probably not a good idea to be wearing them out in a VHS player. So instead, what we're going to do is use a DVD player. I've copied a few of the games from the internet to DVD so that we can use them. And I've even done us a fetching little menu, so that we can play the games in a safer way without risking damaging the tapes. And if you do have VHS-based systems, I would definitely recommend doing it this way. you just don't want to risk those tapes getting damaged. It isn't a good idea. They're already fairly worn out. And I think if you look closely at this one, you can actually see some deterioration on the cassette itself. Perhaps even some mold or just damp has got there. All in all, not a good idea to be using the cassette tape itself. So with that in mind, let's cue up Sonic Fury. Switch on the ActionMax. And we'll take a look at the configuration and calibration screen that comes up at the beginning.
Stand by for target practice. Fire at the center
Now,
of the flashing target.
you'll see that we have the circle in the corner here, and that's where the suction cup needs to be.
On your base unit. Turn it
So with that connected, it should now work. Whether or not it will is anyone's guess.
the score signal.
It actually did first hit. It hasn't been working most of the day, that's why I'm surprised. There you go, I didn't move at all, and that wasn't a hit.
Flashing target.
I know I'm cheating by being so close, but honestly, this thing is not going to work from any real distance. This is actually the most reliable it's been all day. Yeah, this is actually being really reliable right now. So you can see when you do hit something, it lights up and you get target hit, whereas when you miss, you get the sound of a ricochet, which is actually quite cool. I quite like that little bit of detail. There you go. So we now reset our score,
Prepare for action.
and we get ready to play Sonic Fury. All these games unfortunately have a really long intro, so you know, just
Welcome to final exams, Lieutenant. This is
something
where we
else,
find out
maybe
if
make
you're
a
good
cup of
enough to fly with the Sonic Fury. Eyes peeled now. Target drone's coming up. If you bag just one today, you'll earn a permanent place in that cockpit. I'm Squadron Leader Major Lance Benson. Alabama for short. Nicknames only up here, by the way, so we'll be calling you Ace from here on.
oh look, he's
Like
calling me
right
Ace so that he
wing,
doesn't have to call me my real name, which he doesn't know.
Native American Top Gun Chief and resident hot dog trucker.
Wow, you could not have more
Let's check your
token
access
wingmen
plans.
if you actually
Got you waiting
tried.
back here? Nice to know that rear view screen is there if you need it, huh?
Yeah, nice to know that it's needed in a game that isn't really a game, and so I'll never need to look behind me. Oh, here we go. Can I hit this target? I'm going to be super impressed if I can. So any second now we'll get a target window.
Come on,
No.
Ace. You gonna let that
No.
remote control scrap
No.
deep out fly you?
Yes,
Come on,
it
I'll
hit!
give you a hand.
I have not managed to hit a target in this game yet, and my score has gone up by one.
Good guys have two tailpipes.
Let's hit the good guy. Let's see if my score goes down.
Check this
Sure.
out, Ace. Can you shoot around me and nail this tin can?
Get out of there, trucker.
Fortunately for him, I'm not actually able to hit him. Oh, there you go. My score just went down to 0. I don't know if you can see that there. Score just went back down to 0 because I hit the friendly.
Welcome aboard, Ace. It's official. Your Sonic.
So you can see that when you hit good targets,
All right, gentlemen.
if it actually accepts the hit, you do get a point, and if you hit friendlies,
Somebody else take a
then
look.
you lose a
I've got
point.
something out there closing fast.
I believe
Must
it
be
can
right
also
on.
assign
Watch
different
it.
scores based on how quickly you hit a target, but I don't know how it works that out. To do with the frequency of the light again, I'm guessing,
Sonic leader to
but
Rocket Robin. Sonic leader to
see
Rocket
if we can
Robin.
hit anything
Do you
else.
copy?
12 o'clock, 12 o'clock.
I see him, Chief.
Don't come
I was never gonna hit that.
Our governor radar was right on top of us.
Chief, follow me down. I'm gonna get a closer look at these two. Ace, stay behind us to fly cover. Trucker, you keep your eyes peeled for strays. Okay, Ace. Trucker, you should have all 4 of us visual back there.
Yeah, I've got you on radar too. I think we're back in business.
Right. Radar's back.
Single bogey coming fast, Alabama. 600 knots.
I got him, Chief. Heads up back there.
oh, actually, this is the best I've ever done at
Someone down now,
ActionMax.
gentlemen. We got it under control.
12 o'clock, 12 o'clock.
So the ones with 2 tailpipes, don't forget, they're allies, so I don't want to be hitting those. It'd be nice if they would get out of the way so that I can hit the actual target. And you can see that there we've picked up 2 points from those 2 hits that we got.
They must be jamming everything but short range. Disregard radar. Visual from here on.
I'm going in for a lock.
Now obviously the gun sound effect doesn't really make a huge amount of sense in this game,
More bandits coming in. 2 o'clock.
because I'm pretty sure most fighter aircraft don't just have a revolver attached to the front of them as their primary weapon.
I lost lock on him.
Oh,
What's
come on.
going on? Come on, baby.
I've actually lost all my points. I must have hit the friendly. I am sure that if I was to really fine-tune the brightness and contrast, play with that distance dial a lot, maybe we could improve the accuracy of the system. But generally, this is just how poor it
Just
is.
come in here playing hit and run. Stay with them. Anybody see any sign of Chief?
No, I'm not picking him up anywhere.
Next up then, we'll take a look at the rescue of Pops Ghostly. It's a bit of a campy ghost thing really, but it's fun enough. Oh, silly dog, don't run into the house. That's clearly haunted, but it's alright, the kids will follow you in anyway, because they haven't been taught boundaries. Oh, lightning on a sunny day. Something's about to go down. It's really sunny, where's this lightning coming from? Ah, now we've been locked in the creepy house. That is the best puppet I've ever seen.
Thank heaven you're here. I'm Pops. Pops Ghostly. And boy, do we need your help.
I think we should skip ahead to some gameplay.
Pops! Pops!
I say
just saw
gameplay.
another one.
It's not what I
They're
mean.
even uglier than the guys we saw before. They're everywhere. Everywhere.
You see,
Okay, here we go. Let's
it's
shoot
been
some
like this
ghosts.
for generations.
Or not,
Ghosts
as the
may
case
live
will
here.
most likely be.
And one day-
Yes, no hits. Normal service has been restored. Oh yeah, got a hit. Never managed to get a hit on Pops Ghostly. One of the problems in this game is I find it quite hard to know which are the good characters. There are good characters. I think it's those rubbish puppets, but it could also be these guys. It feels a lot like, you know how some theme parks have a ride where you go around with a gun and you have to shoot at a few things? Like animatronic things. It feels a little bit like that. Oh, I think that was one of the friendlies. You can see there the two different frequencies of light. So they were two friendlies, these puppet ones on the outside. And I say puppet as if the other one was real. I don't want to shoot the ghost dog, I'm not doing that. No, I refuse. I don't care if it's an enemy or not. I currently have a score of 0 because I must have shot the wrong thing too many times. Score of 1! Next up then we have Point 38, Ambush Alley. And this is one where the gun sound effects will probably fit in a bit better.
Alright, now you rookies, you did pretty good with these targets. But now, we're gonna give you the toughest test we can.
Again, we get some lovely intro cinematic. To be fair, like in a world of 8-bit games, this would have looked pretty cool. I can totally, I think I would have wanted this, just from seeing it. Once you've played it and you realise that it is lame, although even then, when you go to the arcade and you play arcade shooters, even things like Virtua Cop, that plays the same way every time. That's a linear game. So basically this is just bringing arcade shooters home. Why did this thing never get Mad Dog McCree? It should totally have got Mad Dog McCree. Where's my part there? This is only one player. I don't know which one's the goodie and which one's the baddie. It's alright because I missed them both. I definitely shot at the good person there. We're not doing fantastically well. We're really not doing very well.
It isn't easy, is it?
No, it's not easy, mostly because the gun doesn't work very well.
To see why we call this ambush alley.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm in an alley called Ambush Alley. I was expecting to get ambushed. Well, can we just get one more hit, please? I feel like I'm in the beginning of RoboCop where he gets all his body parts shot off. No, nothing. Yay! While the concept is undoubtedly pretty cool, the repetitive nature of ActionMax games, combined with their less than Hollywood filming standards, soon loses its appeal. While the lack of real interactivity and the linear nature of the games due to the limitations of the standard VHS format means they play the same way every time, regardless of the player, leaving very little in the way of replay value. A fifth game called Blue Thunder was released based on the 1983 film of the same name. Here, the use of film footage is definitely a bonus, but again this game brings nothing new to the format. As an interesting side note, the helicopter from this game could still be seen on the Disney Hollywood Studios backlot tour until 2009, when it was deemed to be unfit for display and sadly scrapped. A sixth game was advertised by the name of Fright Night, presumably based on the 1985 film, but has never been seen, so was likely never actually edited for ActionMax use. Sadly, 1987 was a bad year for Worlds of Wonder, after the death of a 19-year-old boy who was mistakenly shot by police officers while playing LazerTag. This negative PR, coupled with the end of their deal with Nintendo, caused unease amongst shareholders, and after a stock market crash, the company began liquidation in 1988, with their big brands being sold off to other companies, including LazerTag, which is now owned by Hasbro. Though interestingly, the new line of LazerTag toys can be made backwards compatible with Worlds of Wonder products by the use of a secret code placed there by former employees. By 1990, Worlds of Wonder had officially closed its doors for good. Although years later, the discovery of large amounts of unsold ActionMax stock led to the product reappearing in clearance outlets, albeit at a greatly reduced price, and with the original Sonic Fury VHS cassette now hastily transferred to a DVD due to the obsolescence of VHS players. However, despite DVD technology allowing for multiple scene selections and increased interactivity, there's still no connection between console and video, so don't be expecting this to add anything to the format. While no other game cassettes were given this treatment, the videos are available online and can easily be burnt to DVD or streamed for home use. And bizarrely, there are even homebrew games available for the system, due to how simple it is to edit video into a format the ActionMax sensors can read. In fact, the geniuses over at Retro Game Living Room have even made a video which utilises the sensors of both the ActionMax and Sega Video Driver consoles for a simultaneous driving and shooting game, proving that there really are no limits to the retro homebrew community. That's all we've got time for on today's show, but remember you can keep in touch by following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, or even supporting the show on Patreon. And I'll be back soon with a look at another VHS-based system. Thanks for watching.